In 1893, when Thomas was 21, his father died of a sudden illness, leaving the family farm in financial ruin. Thomas immediately took over his father's job working the fields from sunrise to sunset. But at night he tinkered. He built a crude metal detector by hand and started searching for buried treasure. He found neither treasure nor fame during his lifetime, but today we remember him as the man who invented the metal detector. So how did he do it? After his father's death, Thomas was desperate to make money. One day he heard about a man who made good money salvaging metals from shipwrecks. That sounded like easy money, but he needed a better way to find the metal under the sand, so he did what any normal person would do. He went to the library and checked out every book on electricity and magnetism. Back then, metal detectors weren't invented yet, so all he had to go on was theory. He began experimenting with the idea of using a metal pointer, like a divining rod, but instead of wood, he crafted metal rods. He connected them to a battery with insulated wire, making sure that the rods wouldn't touch each other. Then he put a headset on his head. Wait a minute, that doesn't look right. Okay, so he put the headphones on his head and completed the circuit by touching the rods together. He started walking along the beach and suddenly he heard a click in his headphones. He looked down and saw that the metal rods had joined together. He continued walking and the clicking got louder. Then he noticed that the sound changed when he walked over a metal object. He had invented the metal detector. He spent the next few years improving his invention and even wrote a paper about it, but no one believed him. They thought it was impossible, so he gave up and went back to farming. But one day in 1907, a man named Alexander Graham Bell called him and asked him to come to Washington, D.C., to demonstrate his invention. Finally, someone believed him, so why don't we use metal detectors to find buried treasure today? Well, because most of the time there's more junk than treasure. And finding buried treasure isn't as profitable as salvaging shipwrecks. So that's what we use them for. So next time you see a metal detector, remember the man who invented it. He didn't have much formal education, but he was curious about the world, and that made him invent one of the most useful devices ever created. Hey, don't forget to keep on thinking. At night, Thomas would study by candlelight. His family's home had no electricity. Few homes in rural America did. The dim flame flickered as he flipped through old science magazines he borrowed from the town library. He dreamed of a future where darkness could be pushed away with the flip of a switch. But for a poor farm boy, such dreams seemed impossible. Still, Thomas couldn't help himself. He began tinkering with wires and batteries and glass jars in the barn. More than once, he shocked himself badly. His mother worried, "Tommy, you'll kill yourself with those experiments." But he only smiled. "Mama, one day I'll light the world." Years passed. Thomas, now a young man, continued his experiments. One night, while walking back from the barn, he slipped on some loose stones and fell. As he lay there looking up at the sky, he thought about how much his life had changed. When he was a young boy, the night sky was his only source of light. Now he had a lantern. And when he looked closer at the lantern, an idea struck him like lightning. He jumped up and ran to the barn, throwing open the doors. "I've got it," he shouted. "I'll make my own electricity." Thomas spent the next 2 years building his invention. It was hard work, but finally he finished. He had created a small generator powered by the wind. It wasn't much, but it produced enough electricity to power a single light bulb. On a clear night, he stood in his yard staring up at the homemade windmill on top of his barn. The blades turned slowly in the night wind, and inside the house, a single light bulb illuminated the room. Thomas had brought light to his family's home and proved that even a poor farm boy could change the world. But Thomas's invention didn't stop there. He continued to improve his design, and soon he was supplying electricity to the entire town. People came from miles around to see the amazing inventions of the man who once shocked himself with a jar of wires. And all because a farm boy dared to dream of a world without darkness. At 18, Thomas built his first real invention. It was a lamp powered by a battery he built himself. He was so proud of it that he took it to the general store in town to show off. All the townspeople gathered around. For a moment, the bulb glowed, then fizzled out. Smoke filled the room. Everyone started laughing. "Stick to farming, boy," they said. "Electricity is for city folk." Thomas's face burned with shame. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to scream, "I'll show you," but he didn't. He just nodded and walked out the door. He walked past the fields and the river until he came to an old abandoned house at the edge of town. He'd heard rumors that the place was haunted, but he wasn't scared. Not anymore. What was he waiting for? A sign from God, a bolt from the blue. Life wasn't gonna hand him anything. That night, under the pale glow of the moon, he got to work. He had an idea for a new kind of battery that used a chemical reaction to generate electricity. The idea came from a book he'd read about a man who'd done something similar years ago. But Thomas wasn't just gonna copy the man's work. He was gonna improve it, make it better. He spent all night hunched over his workbench, his clothes caked in dirt and grime, his hair and beard growing long and tangled. He didn't eat or sleep until his work was done. And when the sun finally peeked over the horizon, he stood back to admire his creation. It was a small battery, no bigger than a fist, but it was powerful enough to light up a small room. He tested it with a light bulb, then with a motor, then with a small electric arc that sent sparks flying. He was so excited that he ran through the streets, his arms outstretched, yelling, "I did it! I did it!" The townspeople stared at him, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. They didn't understand what he'd done, but they could see that he was happy, and that was enough for them. From that day on, Thomas was known as the Madman of Menlo Park. He continued to invent and experiment, and although he never became rich or famous, he was content. He knew that he had something special, a gift for creating things that other people couldn't. And even though the world might have laughed at him, he knew that he was more than just a farmer's son. He was an inventor. He was a madman. And he wouldn't trade it for the world. Do you know who this is? Let me know in the comments below, and if you liked this story, stay tuned for more. This is the incredible story of how Nikola Tesla, one of the most important inventors of all time, became famous. In 1892, at the age of 20, Thomas left home with nothing but a small bag and a notebook full of sketches. He boarded a train to Chicago, hoping to find work in a workshop. Life in the city was harsh. He swept floors in a machine factory during the day and worked on his inventions at night. He lived in a cramped boarding house and often skipped meals to save money for parts, but he never stopped drawing. One day, while working on a new invention in his room, Thomas's notebook caught fire. He desperately tried to blow out the flames, but the pages were stuck together and wouldn't burn. Just then, his landlady burst through the door. She had a bucket of water and managed to put out the fire, but not before the pages had burned a giant hole right through the middle of his book. As he sat there dejected, staring at the charred remains of his work, he heard a knock at the door. It was the superintendent of one of the largest electrical companies in the world. His name was George Westinghouse. He had heard rumors about a young inventor in town who was trying to build an induction motor, and he wanted to take a look for himself. When he saw the notebooks, half of them were filled with brilliant designs for motors and generators. The other half contained bizarre diagrams for death rays and other impossible machines. George was impressed by what he saw and offered Thomas a job on the spot. He hired him to design a motor that could be used in every home and business in the country, and so that's what he did. But when he presented his invention to the public, it was met with ridicule. They said it would never work, but George encouraged Thomas to keep trying. He knew that one day his inventions would make him famous. In 1894, Thomas and his team built a massive generator in a secret laboratory. No one was allowed inside. They worked day and night, and when they were finished, they brought the generator to a farm outside of town. They hooked it up to a giant windmill and turned it on. Electricity arced from the windmill to the ground, lighting up the night sky. The next day, newspapers across the country ran stories about the mysterious lights seen in the sky the night before. People were scared and confused, but no one knew where the electricity was coming from. That's when Thomas made the decision to reveal himself. He wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times and told him that he was the one who had created the lights. He said that he had harnessed the power of the wind and the earth to create free energy for the entire world. And so that's how Nikola Tesla became famous. If you like this kind of story, stay tuned for more. Every great invention started out as just an idea. And sometimes all it takes is one problem and one determined person to solve it. This is the story of how one boy's invention earned him his first paycheck. It was one freezing winter night when Thomas was just about to go to bed. He heard a loud crash outside, followed by shouts and laughter. He looked out the window and saw several boys gathered around something near his bicycle. The next morning, Thomas went out to investigate. As he got closer, he saw what the boys were so excited about. It was his bicycle wheel. One spoke had broken, which caused the whole wheel to collapse. An idea sparked in Thomas's mind. What if a lamp could be powered not by bulky batteries, but by a small generator? He knew just the thing to use, the discarded bicycle wheel from the day before. But he needed more than just a wheel. He roamed family farm for bits of iron to make a strong axle. Then he scavenged some old wires from the junkyard down the road. For weeks, Thomas worked on his idea, trying and failing, learning and improving. Finally, he built a small hand-cranked generator that produced enough power to light a bulb brighter than anything he'd ever made. Thomas took his invention to the factory foreman and showed him how it worked. The man was stunned. "Boy, you may have something there." Soon after, Thomas signed his first small contract. It wasn't much money, but it proved that he wasn't just a dreamer, he was an inventor. If you like this kind of story, stay tuned for more. See you next time. Thomas Edison was born in 1847 in Milan, Ohio. By the early 1900s, electricity was spreading across America, but it was controlled by powerful companies in big cities. For rural towns like the one Thomas grew up in, power was still a distant dream. Thomas saw an opportunity. He believed he could design a cheap, portable generator that would bring light to farms and villages. But when he pitched his idea to investors, they laughed. "Why would we waste money electrifying farmers?" "They can use candles," one investor said, lighting up a cigar with a match. "I'm serious. Who would buy this contraption? People living in the country are poor. They don't have any money to spare on your fancy light bulbs." Thomas felt his face getting hot with anger. Was this guy for real? Did he really think farmers were too dumb to understand electricity? It wasn't their fault. They didn't know about it. No one had taken the time to show them. All the investor saw was a bunch of dumb country folk who couldn't even afford to buy his light bulb, let alone pay for its installation. "I'll show them," Thomas muttered under his breath as he stormed out of the meeting. He was furious, but more determined than ever to prove the investors wrong. That night, Thomas went home and poured all his energy into his work. He tinkered and experimented in his workshop, fueled by anger and the desire for revenge. Finally, he had it. A small, lightweight generator that could easily be transported and set up by one person. It didn't require a large team of electricians or expensive materials. It was cheap, efficient, and most importantly, it worked. Thomas knew this was his moment. He took the prototype to a nearby farm and set it up. Then he invited the local townspeople to come and see it in action. When they arrived, he turned on the generator and the whole town was lit up in an instant. The people were amazed. They had never seen anything like it before. They thanked Thomas and asked him to set up more generators around the town. Soon, word spread about what Thomas had done. People from all over the country wanted him to install his generators. And that's when Thomas Edison truly became famous. He had taken something that was only available to the rich and made it possible for everyone to enjoy. And it all started with one man's trap. A man rented a small shed and turned it into his workshop. There, with a few young apprentices, he worked day and night on his invention, a compact generator powered by a small gasoline engine. Money was always short. Sometimes he couldn't pay his assistants. Once he sold his only coat to buy copper wire. Another time he went 3 days without eating, choosing instead to buy steel parts. But slowly, piece by piece, the machine came together. One day an order came from a wealthy man who owned a large estate on the outskirts of town. He wanted a powerful generator for his mansion. The inventor saw this as his big chance. If he could build a generator that was powerful enough for a rich man's mansion, then he would become famous. So he put all his effort into winning this order. He worked with his assistants to design a generator that was not only powerful, but also compact and portable. They tested different materials and configurations, and finally they settled on a design that they believed would work. The generator was made of a sturdy metal frame that supported a powerful engine. The engine was connected to a shaft that turned a coil of wire within a magnetic field, generating electricity. The whole thing was mounted on wheels so that it could be easily transported. When the wealthy man came to inspect the generator, he was impressed by its power and portability. He ordered 3 more generators and paid the inventor and his assistants handsomely. The inventor was now a rich man. He had enough money to hire more assistants and to buy better tools and materials. He was even able to rent a larger workshop. As the years passed, the inventor continued to improve his generator design. He created a more powerful engine that produced more electricity. He also developed a system for regulating the output voltage, which made the generator more reliable. His generators were in high demand, and he had to expand his workshop several times to meet the growing demand. The inventor never forgot the hard times he had endured in the small shed. He knew that his success was the result of his own hard work and the contributions of his loyal assistants. And so he always treated his employees well, paying them good wages and providing them with a safe and comfortable working environment. He also took pride in the fact that his generators were helping to bring electricity to people who had never had it before. He knew that his inventions were making a real difference in the world, and that made him the happiest of all.